This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 351 of the FCPA Compliance Report. The FCPA Compliance Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, and I'm pleased to announce a new service offering by Advanced Compliance Solutions. It is the Compliance Alliance. It is a three-step process which will help bring you and your sales team greater knowledge and understanding about what compliance officers need in the anti-corruption and other compliance space. It consists of an intensive compliance boot camp, sponsorship of a podcast series, and then sales training targeted to not only your market, but also your sales message. Interested parties should contact Tom Fox at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Today I have with me David McLaughlin. David is the CEO and founder of QuantaVerse, whose risk reduction solutions provide insight into a wide variety of information that you have on your databases. It includes your customers, your third parties, and your employees. It allows you to identify bad actors and aggressively fight financial crime. But it's much more than simply a tool for the financial services industry or the financial industry. The QuantaVerse internal audit artificial intelligence tool helps to transform internal audit investigations, enhances compliance program with predictive data analytics, and can help you reduce your overall FCPA risk. It's a fascinating interview with someone who's literally on the cutting edge of data analytics, artificial intelligence, and the compliance industry. Once again, we see how techniques, services, and products from the financial services and financial industry can inform the anti-corruption compliance practitioner. I think you will find it very interesting and very thought-provoking as we look at how you can improve your use of data. The FCPA Compliance Report is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. Tom Fox back again for another episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. Today, you're in for a real treat because I'm going to talk to David McLaughlin. David is the, I think, founder of QuantaVerse, and it is a very interesting compliance tool that utilizes both a innovative technological solution, but also artificial intelligence to help risk solutions. And David, thank you for taking the time to visit with me and coming on the podcast.
That's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I was wondering if you might be able to describe a little bit about QuantaVerse, what you guys do, and then we can maybe dive into some of the specifics.
Sure. Yeah, you're correct. I'm the founder of the company. We founded it just about 3.5 years ago. We've developed a technology that uses data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning combined with the power around big data and the ability to look at vast amounts of data to identify instances of financial crimes that previously had been going unidentified. There's a lot of work that's been done, and there's a lot of money being spent in the reg tech space, and the money being spent is well spent, but we're as an industry really we have a huge opportunity, I'll say, to have a bigger impact in helping all of our companies, financial services as well as global corporates and other companies, combat the effects of financial crimes that employees or customers may be engaged in.
So, David, one of the things that really intrigued me about the approach of QuantaVerse is, number one, which you just articulated, to help prevent financial crimes, but actually you take it, and I think what I think is a much more interesting and hopeful, innovative, and hopefully step where many other companies will see the value, which is to identify customers, third parties, and others with whom you would want to do business. So I was wondering if you might be able to describe how not only the tools that you guys have help companies find bad actors, but also identify customers with whom your clients want to do business.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you can think of the results of the work that we do as putting groups of customers into three buckets or three big categories. One is this is just a bad actor that you are taking too much risk in having as a customer. You just don't want to be doing business with this person. They're either going to launder money through your organization, or they're going to put you at risk for some other financial crime. So that's one group of customers, and our clients certainly know, once we give them that information, what to do with that and how to handle that. And then once within your client base you see who those people are, everybody else fits in one of two buckets. Those two buckets are not really sure, sort of a gray area, can't really say that, in fact, that this customer is too risky to be doing business with and presenting too much risk, but we should keep an eye on what their behavior is and whether they, in fact, are engaging in an activity that presents us with some risk. And then, of course, the third category is just those folks that are operating legitimately and have illicit businesses and illicit transactions and financial flows, and certainly those are the types of customers that our clients want to keep and make sure that they're happy and service in a great way. So, yeah, just by almost by definition, when we find bad folks, we find the rest of the universe and identify them potentially as good customers.
David, one of the other things that really intrigued me about the products and services you guys provide is, while it's generally, we've discussed how it might help companies find bad actors or identify customers with whom they would want to do business, I found some pretty specific service lines, corporate disciplines, and departments that the services and tools you guys have could positively impact. And I'd like to go through those because you write about them and you've got blogs posted about them. And the first one is internal audit. So I was wondering if you might describe how the tools and services might help a hypothetical internal audit team at a corporation or a bank.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, historically, and for most companies, internal audit, while an important function of a corporation or a company that has good controls in place, usually suffers from being in a position of being under-resourced. They don't necessarily have the budgets, and they don't necessarily have the technological capabilities to accomplish what it is that really the board and the shareholders and the employees need them to accomplish. I mean, through no fault of anybody's, it's just historically the way it's been relative to any sort of core competency inside of a company that isn't revenue producing or working with clients. They're oftentimes under resourced. And with that lack of tools that I mentioned comes again, oftentimes, I'm speaking with a broad brush, but oftentimes comes an approach to audit where the audit function will define what it is that they're intending to audit for the next year. They publish it to the company and to their fellow employees, which is the right thing to do. And then they engage in a plan where they systematically follow that publication of what it is they're going to audit, what they're going to audit. And they generally do that by doing a random sample of either transactions or a random sample of records or whatever function it is that they're doing. What we have found with this technology is that they can very cost effectively take a much broader look at activities that their fellow employees are engaged in. They can not just take a small random sample and assume that random sample is representative of the overall general population. They, in fact, now can look at the general population. They can now, in fact, look at every transaction that is going through the general ledger. They can look at every expense report that their employees have submitted. They can look at every contract and pull out relative information in the contract. They look at every agent that is working for the company, both domestically and abroad, and ensure that the standards that they have put in place are in fact being followed by, sometimes globally spread out employees. And the ability to do that in a cost-effective manner, and the ability to look at entire functions through an audit is something that we believe can radically change what the audit organization is tasked with and what it is that we will hold the chief audit executive in the audit department accountable for. Because really, they're the last line of defense for a company. And a company needs to ensure that as that last line of defense, they are effectively catching and effectively putting the program in place that is going to protect that company and that company's reputation from potential bad actors that may try to impact them.
So I really like the way you phrased it, the last line of defense. What I would say is the third line of defense, but since that's third line is three out of three, that makes it the last line. Correct. I'd like to move, though, up to the second line where sort of my people sit, the chief compliance officer, the compliance practitioner, the compliance professional. Most of us, including myself, came to the role from the corporate legal department. We're lawyers. It's not that we're technophobes. We're just generally challenged technologically. So, but one of the things that really intrigued me was your thoughts on how both your solution and artificial intelligence can really help compliance programs. And here I saw something a little bit different than what you talked about in AI, which is really a detect mode. And I saw the ability to have a compliance officer move from a strict detection mode to a prevention mode. And that's important because the three parts of a compliance program are generally said to be prevention, detection, and remediation. And if you can move to prevention through the use of QuantaVerse tools, I think you really can get a step ahead. And I was wondering if you could talk about, you really did a great job in detailing the different types of things that you guys could look at. But I was wondering how you might see a compliance officer who's not an internal auditor, who's not a quantitative type, would be able to use this information that the tools would give him for a more proactive or preventative approach.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you reference, of course, the preventive part of a compliance program, is the holy grail. If you can prevent it, then you certainly don't have to remediate any challenges on the back end. And that is one of the promises of an artificial intelligence enabled program, an artificial intelligence enabled technology, is that you can begin to get predictive, and you can begin to, with accuracy, not just predictive as in let's put our fingers in the wind and try to guess which way the wind is blowing, but actual predictions that can be tracked, measured, validated, and used to really prevent potential instances of future crimes. And let me give you a real example of how that can work. For several of our clients, we look at the values of the transactions, the volumes of transactions, and the velocity of those transactions going through their organization. And in the past, they've been okay. It's not been the best answer, but then they've been okay looking at those values, volumes, and velocity in a rearview mirror and saying, you know what, this last month didn't behave the way that it did a year ago. What went wrong? And again, valuable tool, but what artificial intelligence can do is take that information and use a derivation that we've created of a little technical here, of a triple smoothing algorithm. It's a derivation of a Holt-Winters algorithm that allows you to look at that behavior in the past and predict what the future behavior might be. And this prediction is more than just a straight line prediction, or it's more than just it was 1, then 2, now it's going to be 3. It's a really complex model that takes in variations in seasonality, takes in variations in economic factors, the multiple variations that could change those volumes and those values and the velocity of those transactions can be sort of smoothed out and driven out through the use of this algorithm to give you a very accurate prediction what the future might look like, whatever that time period may be, the next month, the next quarter, the next year. Obviously, the further out that you go, the less accurate your predictions will become. But it is the promise of that capability can be applied in multiple varieties and forms and fashions. And so, if QuantaVerse can see that data, historical data, and we can build a variation of our triple smoothing algorithm against any sort of set of employee or agent or customer behavior, we can then begin to generate predictions on what those future behaviors may be. Expense reporting is a great example. I mean, it's a area that's ripe for people to give bribes to foreign officials and do it through expense reporting. You can look at an employee's expense reports and you can get very accurate in your prediction of what they are going to be. And if some change or anomaly happens, it doesn't mean that employee has committed a crime, but it means you may need to look at it. And if you're going to look at it, that's going to help you get preventive. And if you can predict how a customer's or an employee is behaving and see something that looks anomalous, then you're going to be able to prevent future financial crimes through that.
You know, it strikes me, David, that this tool has some pretty outstanding applications in what I would just call general business efficiencies. Because if you can take the volumes, values, and velocity of the delivery of a vendor from the supply chain, take a retrospective look back and see when there was increases or decreases, that could certainly help you plan business going forward in the future. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. The applications of this technology I think are really at this point only limited by our imagination. There are so many efficiency processes, risk management processes, marketing capabilities, business development capabilities through the use of these technologies. We've at QuantaVerse, so whether it's QuantaVerse or not QuantaVerse, the potential applications are huge. We at QuantaVerse because of that have made the decision that we're really focused on the risk side of this in the financial crime space. Again, whether it's AML or FCPA or ABC violations, whatever that, or counterterrorism financing, whatever that is, we're really getting really great at reducing and lowering and driving that risk to as low as it can be for a company.
The other thing I think I'm sensing is that, let me go about it a different way, because one of the problems in many corporations is the siloed nature of the different disciplines. So even within the compliance discipline, for instance, you might have an anti-corruption compliance specialist, you might have an export control compliance specialist, you might have a trade compliance specialist, you might have a anti-money laundering compliance specialist. And they may be looking at, if not similar data, the same data, but they're so siloed that they're not talking to each other. It occurs to me that the risk-based approach that you guys are using would not only allow them to talk to each other, but with one set of data, a company could manage a very wide range of risks across the spectrum and actually move that to strategic risk planning.
Absolutely. And in addition to that capability, what the opportunity there is to be able to do that, you need to get very good. A company needs to get very good. Since the departments are siloed and the people are siloed, oftentimes the technology is siloed. And a company needs to get very good at making sure that the data that they're looking at is good. That, in fact, the same customer may be held in two different core platforms are identified the same way. And it's oftentimes an easy sounding that anybody that's not in the industry or not having to worry about that problem is an easy sounding problem, which in fact is quite difficult. And the reasons for it being difficult are numerous. I mean, culturally, they the organizations may enter the names differently. One may put the last name first and then the first name, and another may put the first name. Someone may put Mr., salutation, while another doesn't put the name with a salutation. So if it's a corporate entity, someone may put whether it's an LLC or a C corp, or, all of those sort of cultural differences of our business lead to data on the parties to those transactions that can make it very difficult to clean up. And again, a perfect use case for an artificial intelligence tool and a machine learning tool to be able to clear up those differences and make sure that picture that you just painted can actually work. Because it's not a technology issue, what you described there. That is a corporate cultural issue of how those organizations and how those people can potentially work together. And it won't work unless the data that they're looking at and analyzing has been cleaned and normalized and made to be assimilated so that the same customer or the same outside entity is viewed the same way between those parties.
Let me ask you one specific question about FCPA, because in February, the Department of Justice released a document entitled The Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs. And it's a list of 11 separate prongs of components that a company should use as a benchmark for a best practices compliance program. And it's based on something called the 10 hallmarks of an effective compliance program, and it adds one more, which is new to the compliance practitioner, and that is a root cause analysis. And I was wondering how the QuantaVerse tool would help provide feedback for corporate leadership through a root cause analysis, and then using that data in a feedback loop for process improvement. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, this is very akin to models and rules in the anti-money laundering space. They have, to your earlier point at the top of the program, there's been a lot of success and a lot of development in AML inside of financial services organizations. And one of the ways that they've done that is by creating models and rules and then continuing to tune those rules to make sure that they're as effective as they can be. And the concept of a root cause analysis to say, okay, we've had some sort of violation in FCPA and to ensure that we don't want to do that again or suffer from that again is let's understand what really caused it. Culturally, what caused it? Was it a single employee? Was it a mix of employees? Why weren't the controls in place? What happened to the audit function? All of those things combined to say, what's the RCA of this challenge that we faced? And then what is the remediation behind it? And so, again, it can be a pretty daunting task for somebody to say, okay, I need to get to the bottom of the root cause analysis if they don't have good data around it. And if the data was siloed between different departments and potentially hard to find and hard to examine, you can interview people inside your company, but if you don't have the data, which are the facts behind it, are you really getting to that root cause? And the ability for a tool like this is to ensure that, one of the things that a tool like this can do is to ensure that, in fact, when you find a root cause, when the appropriate people find the root cause of a violation, has this happened before? What's the scale and scope of this? If I had a root cause, a root cause is potentially a systemic problem inside an organization, how do I go explore whether this systemic problem has been significant inside my organization, or in fact, this is a one-time event? And so the ability to take these technologies and say, now I understand my root cause, let me go and evaluate really the scale and scope of this problem and this challenge inside my organization. And certainly board members, directors of audit and the chief audit executive and the CCO, the global CCO, want to and need to understand and should understand the scope of this root cause. And even before we worry about remediation and what we're going to do to change it, what has really happened in the past inside the organization, and how big has that problem been? Because then we can sort of go down the path and say, now we know how we have to fix. Now we know the scale of this problem, the scope of this problem, and what it is that we do to really have to remediate this for the future.
Well, David,
and then of course these technologies can be. I'm sorry to interrupt. And of course these technologies can be used as part of that remediation problem. Again, the examination of data and the ability to see anomalies in data and patterns in vast amounts of data is something unique to this technology that can ensure that those problems don't happen again once identified.
Well, David, I know you said that QuantaVerse focuses on the risk side of things, but I would have to suggest to you that by focusing on the risk side of things, a company can make themselves not only more efficient, but much stronger in their risk management process, and allow them to respond more quickly to either changing market conditions, emerging laws, emerging technologies, new regulations, reputational issues. And if you can move more quickly, you can potentially have an opportunity, I think, for a greater profitability. So I would see this really as a tool which allows companies to be more nimble, more quick, make more strategic use of risk as part of their overall business plan going forward.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Is that we all need good data, and we all need, the larger the company, the more important the data that the business leaders need to make great decisions. And that strategic risk plan and the strategic business sort of oversight of how you use this data, I think is something that is has a lot of promise. I agree that the ability to take sort of a holistic view of the insights that you're going to garner, that somebody's going to garner from this type of analysis, again, is something that can be extremely valuable to any company.
David, I was wondering if anyone wanted more information on QuantaVerse. Could you give us the website or tell us how they might be able to find out more information?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to help anybody that wants more information on us or even just these technologies and the potential of these technologies. Our website is www.QuantaVerse.net. It's QuantaVerse, one word, QuantaVerse.net. We are certainly on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we produce a lot of blogs. We've been getting published by lots of national and global periodicals lately, and we're glad to be a part of your podcast as well, and welcome any follow-up from anybody.
So I've been visiting with David McLaughlin, the founder of QuantaVerse. We've been having a fascinating discussion about how his company uses technological solutions and artificial intelligence to help you reduce your risk, or I would say actually manage your risk better, and provide strategic insights into how you can not only identify bad actors who might impact your company, but I think actually improve your business processes and help you find folks that you'd want to do with. David, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to visit with me. It's been fascinating, and I certainly hope we can continue the conversation. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you again for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would rate our podcast. It would help get the word out about one of the top compliance-related podcasts. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the FCPA Report, and I hope you'll join us next week for another edition where I explore the FCPA, compliance, and compliance-related issues. This is Tom Fox. The FCPA Compliance Report is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.